There we go. I have two screens in front of me, as you can see, so I'm going to be looking at this one because I have notes here. But hi, as an introduction, I'm Jonathan. I'm the Advocacy Officer at Renikasan. I've spoken to a lot of you over email, so it's really good to see everybody here. So yeah, I work across our campaigns on policy-related matters. I track relevant policy updates, and where possible, try to influence policymakers. So those are two things which are sort of quite relevant to the aims of this forum, as we'll see today. So yeah, if members would like to introduce themselves first and just say a little bit about who you are and where you work and why you're interested in the forum. I'm happy to pick people out. If Rabbi Gluck, you'd like to go first.
Okay. My name is Rabbi Herschel Gluck, OBE. I've been working in this field, in this arena for many years in various and diverse aspects of it, both in the UK and around the world.
Thank you. Sharon, if you'd like to go.
Hi, I'm Sharon Daniels. I'm the head of the Chesed and Volunteering Department at the United Synagogue. In terms of this, we have a kosher food bank. We support about 160 families a week. We also try and support people to access other appropriate support that they might need. And also we run an asylum seeker drop-in, a Ukraine drop-in, and other projects around human rights. We're looking to do cooking for the homeless and things like that next winter. So thinking about those kind of outreach projects that we can do as well.
Great. Sharon, Geraldine, if you'd like to say.
Shalom, everybody. Lovely to see you. And good to hear, Sharon, about the outreach programs that you're doing. I'm an international human rights lawyer. I helped draft the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and I headed a project with the United Nations Economic, Social and Cultural Rights Organization on law's duty to the poor. And so this is an area I've been working in for decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Hi everyone, my name is Marina Baraz. I'm a director at the London Jewish Forum, and the London Jewish Forum works on a variety of issues that affect Jewish Londoners, and human rights are, I suppose, one of them. So it's really interesting to be here.
Margaret, if you'd like to go.
Sorry, did you say Margaret? Sorry, I didn't hear slightly. Hi, I'm Margaret.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, somebody's quite quiet.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, Margaret, if you can please introduce yourself.
Sorry. Okay, I've got you on full, but you sounded sort of quite quiet for some reason. Hi, I'm Margaret Greenfields, and delighted to find myself in really exalted company. So I was invited to attend this meeting by Mia last week. I'm Professor of Social Policy. I know a number of people in this room, in this space. I started off as a lawyer, then moved into legal policy, and from there into general social policy. And at the moment, I'm involved in two quite major projects from the UKRI, one of which is around access to housing, accommodation, and broader services to refugees and asylum seekers. And I also do a lot of work with Roma populations, which is why I've been involved with Renikasan for probably about 12 years now, I think, as an advisor in that area. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear you properly for a minute.
Thanks so much, Margaret. And then finally, I think Rachel, our colleague, let's go.
Hi everyone. Sorry I have my camera off. I'm a little under the weather. My name is Rachel, and I run the Right to Food campaign that I think Mia will talk about in just a second at Renikasan. And Jonathan and I have been dreaming up the Jewish Everyday Rights Forum for quite a few months now. So it's a real delight to have you all assembled today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, Rachel's in charge of the slides today, so if you could change it, Rachel. Great, thanks. Yeah, so I'll just run through what we're doing today. So we've just had the introductions. Then we're going to just talk about the Jewish Everyday Rights Forum, why we felt the need to set it up, what we plan to do with it, and what sort of materially our actions will look like through it. Then Geraldine, who's just introduced herself, Geraldine, who's just introduced herself, is going to talk about what everyday rights are from more of a human rights and legal perspective. Then we're going to finish by talking about tangibly what our next steps for 2025 are, so you know what to expect from us. And I'll talk a little bit about sort of the policy landscape that we're looking at and possible things we can work on together. And then we'll have a little Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, I just ask that you can put them in the chat, but also just ask that you save them for the end, and then we can talk through them there. So yeah, thank you. Great. So yeah, why we felt the need to set something up. So over the past 2 years at René Cassin, we've really strengthened our relationships with many human rights organisations and campaign groups that are lobbying the government on various issues related to social, cultural and economic rights. As a charity, we're already embedded in the UK network for everyday rights advocacy. We're on the steering group for the ESCR, which is the acronym for Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. We're on the steering group for the ESCR network, which leads these efforts in the UK, and this is coordinated by Just Fair, who are sort of the real experts and pushers in the field of everyday rights. But as a Jewish charity, we are frequently asked to contribute information about lived Jewish experiences to arrange reports throughout the year, and these reports go on to inform policymakers when making policy decisions. So the Jewish Everyday Rights Forum essentially marks a step to formalise the Jewish voice in these processes. And I really want to emphasise that you, as the forum members, are the experts, and we want the forum to be a vehicle for conveying your expertise. Mia, do you want to talk about right to food?
Yeah, so Monsieur Cassin, who drafted the Universal Declaration, the idea behind the declaration was that human rights would be the solution for justice and peace. And he envisaged that being achieved not just through what we would say political rights, but also socioeconomic rights. And there's one article that stands out, and I just want to read it out because in a way that has determined the direction René Cassin, the organization, now takes in expanding her work. And that's Article 25, which says that everyone has the right to standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself or herself, I added that, and of their family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services. So if our legacy is to deliver Monsieur Cassin's legacy, that has to include socioeconomic rights. So way back in 2021, when we said we have to take that responsibility seriously, we were trying to unpick which of the socioeconomic rights would also deliver what René Cassin does best, which is bring human rights to the Jewish community and then bring the uniqueness of Jewish community, Jewish identity, Jewishness to human rights. So we chose food. I mean, nothing's more central than food. But the thinking behind it was that we can facilitate and bring the uniqueness of a human rights perspective to looking at issues of accessing food within a Jewish context. So we call right to food, and in the Jewish context, it's called Mishloach Manot. It's called Shnat Shmita. It's all about making sure that everyone in our community, in our society, has equal access to necessary food. But we also brought the Jewish perspective to the human rights issue. And really critical around the right to food was in the peak, not that we're past the peak of cost of living, but at the peak of the crisis of cost of living was access to kosher food, whether it was schools, whether it was elderly people, and the fact how there was disproportionate impact. Not disproportionate, there was impact on the ability of members of the Jewish community to access culturally and religiously necessary foods. This kind of input and case studies were submitted as part of a joint coalition submission to a UN periodic review of the UK's compliance with the UN Convention on Socioeconomic Rights. So it goes a long way in bringing both the specifics of the Jewish community, but also as an example of a marginalized group. And that is what Renee Kassan does. So we will bring the Jewish perspective, but then it's a way of also highlighting how other marginalized groups, if it's refugees or disabled people or people from Roma, Gypsy, and traveler communities, are disproportionately impacted. And that has worked really well. So there has always been that combination of what does a human rights perspective bring to a Jewish understanding of what right to food is. And that was by using Jewish narratives and Jewish text and Jewish examples. And then what does a Jewish perspective mean in terms of being able to access rights? And that is by highlighting the challenges that the Jewish community faces today in the UK in accessing food. And what we're hoping to do with the help of this forum is expand that into also access to health and access to housing, and therefore deliver on our commitment to Article 25.
Right. Rachel, if you could change the slide. Do you want to run through these?
So what do we want from the forum? This, like Jonathan and Rachel said, this has been months in the making. Actually, the vision set was started with Geraldine when we launched our Right to Food commitment a couple of years ago. So this is something that we're really looking forward to, and we see it as a relationship between what Renee Kassan can help and provide as facilitators or advisors or experts, and what you could do as the experts on the ground. As an entity, what we hope the forum could do is to use it to be a tool to advocate for improved access to health, housing, and food for British Jews. If it's by highlighting cases, bringing specific examples, or by ensuring that the experts are able to make the case. It's about data collection. It was through Renee Kassan's coordinated work that a UK-wide consultation incorporated data provided by GIFT and by Chesed and by other entities concerning the challenges of the UK community to access food. So that's really important for us to be able to, with your help, have that coordinating role. It's to elevate the voices of diverse Jewish communities and influence policymaking. We know that we are as diverse as the number of people that make up the Jewish community. So hopefully, you know, it's providing a kind of guiding and coordinating role. And it's with people like Jonathan predominantly, it's to be able to respond to topical policy developments, whether it's the recent PIP guidelines or the emergent consultation on poverty and child poverty, or hopefully when there will be a debate on enshrining a right to food in UK law. It's about being, you know, knowing that it's happening and being able to coordinate an informed response. And it's providing information and best practice with you guys, because we are part of the wider sector and we do sit with the experts, the legal experts and the practical experts. We're very happy and we see our role as providing that facilitation of transferring information, coordinating introductions, etc. And obviously as a human rights organization, we believe in a rights-based framework. So it's really about promoting a human rights framework that does justice to socioeconomic rights, as it has done over many years to what we would call political and civil rights, but less so to socioeconomic challenges that are becoming more prevalent or more at the forefront of concerns, not just of the Jewish community, but wider British society as a whole. If you have any questions, we have time at the end, so you can write them in the chat or anything, but throughout the session, if you've got any questions or comments, we'll have enough time at the end.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I think really as a campaigning organisation, we don't engage in frontline work, and we really heavily rely on gathering testimonies. And a lot of that thus far has been through Jewish individuals or synagogues or youth movements that we've worked with. So I think this forum is largely about streamlining the way in which information from the Jewish communities on issues such as access to housing or health, the way that that information is communicated to policymakers and to other campaign groups who we work on essential needs. I think one thing that Amir touched on this just before, one thing that we really have noticed, and I'm sure a lot of people here have noticed, is that in wider British society, there's often sort of one idea of what a Jew is or what a Jew looks like, and that really informs poor policy decisions on issues which affect the community. And I think we're really pleased that so far this is a cross-denominational forum, and that we have organisations and individuals who represent completely different types of Jewish communities. And I think that is something that is often missing in policy when you look at it. There's, policymakers know that the Jewish community, I think, is something like 200 to 300,000 on the census, fairly cool, small community, geographically centred, geographically concentrated, and there are all sorts of assumptions about the social economic status of Jews. And I think what we want to put forward is an actual image and testimonies which really reflect the diversity of the Jewish experience in the UK. The slides already changed, thank you. So through the forum, we'd like to integrate these case studies, which will sort of hopefully send to policymakers. So we want to really push the examples and experiences to give a greater civil society platform and work with policymakers to attune their attention to the specific needs of our community. So we'll do that through things like joint letters, where we feel as a forum it is necessary to maybe write an open letter which we can sign on to. We'll be doing that on an ad hoc basis. Submissions, and I can see that Margaret actually posted a call to evidence for a submission in the chat. So that's exactly the sort of thing we'll be working on. So submissions on government bills are really a major way through which the needs of specific communities can be incorporated into law. And we often submit in collaboration with other organisations. You often see charities band together to give a stronger voice when they do put forward a submission. And then what you'll get from us, so we'll be putting out quarterly bulletins, and these will be sort of the main mechanism through which we put out information to the member organisations about relevant issues. We plan to have biannual meetings. So once every half year. I never know if biannual is once every 2 years or once every half year, but once every half year. And then but within that, we remain open to organising meetings ad hoc if something more urgent comes up. So if you want to reach out to us and say this is a real issue that us and maybe other members, other organisations in the forum are facing, and we want to maybe put out an open letter, or there's a submission which we want to contribute to, then we can have a meeting to organise that on an ad hoc basis. And we can also put you, even if something's not directly relevant to us, we can put you in contact with other relevant organisations who might be working on the submission of whatever policy aspect it is. Next slide, please. Thank you.
So I'm really delighted to have Geraldine part of this group. Geraldine, you introduced yourselves, but what you forgot to say is that you're a member of the Renee Kazan Advisory Council, which I think is probably the most important role, but really a true friend and advisor in our journey to expand into socioeconomic rights. So yes. The mic is yours, Geraldine, just to briefly talk us through what socioeconomic cultural rights actually mean.
Well, mazel tov, Rene Cassin, on this very exciting initiative, and thank you for the admonition, Mia. I am very pleased to work with Rene Cassin on this. So, everyday rights is a non-legalistic way of referring to economic, social, and cultural rights. The culture is very important. It often gets dropped, but it's the cultural aspects, which for us is very much of the Jewish cultural aspects, that infuse socioeconomic rights, which is another term. And they haven't just been plucked from the air. These rights are rights to food, adequate nutrition. It's actually broader. It includes water as well, sustainable food productions, rights to the highest attainable standard of health, rights of the adequate standard of living that Mia mentioned, rights of access to housing, and increasingly people are looking at rights to clothing. So those who are unable to have adequate clothing both for the seasons, the way they live, and also if they're going into job interviews. These rights have come from an international treaty, which I will speak about in a moment. But when we talk about human rights, it's rather strange. We have a Human Rights Act, but these socioeconomic rights, these everyday rights, are not in that act. That act only protects civil and political rights, such as speech, religion, privacy. They're very important, but an increasing number of countries now protect these everyday rights. The whole of Latin America, South Africa, India, in other words, countries that are poorer than us and who can afford them less, see the importance of protecting them. And even within Europe, Spain, for example, protects the right to housing. So we're falling behind. This is a growing aspect of the rule of law, which we in the United Kingdom have neglected. And it's also strange because these rights actually started out as British rights. We've all heard of Magna Carta, but Magna Carta had this younger sister called Carta de Forester. And from the 13th century, we actually had rights to food. There were rights to grazing, to gathering various foods, which of course relate directly to a right to food. There was the right to gather herbs and honey. So honey was used medicinally, herbs also. So you have the sort of nascent beginnings of a right to healthcare. And you also had the right to gather wood, which was very useful because, of course, wood was how you constructed your housing in the 13th century. So these are British rights, which we've forgotten all about and very sadly are neglecting. The treaty that these rights, everyday rights, originated from is something called the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And as we know, we have a covenant with God. So the notion of a treaty being called a covenant implies it's on a higher level. And we have a duty to report now every 5 years to a treaty body called the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And consistently, this committee has said, well, it's good that you have a welfare state, but actually you should also have economic, social and cultural rights. Why? Because as we know, welfare protections can be subject to political backwards and forwards. Whereas once something's enshrined in a right, it becomes court protected, firstly. And politicians can't just, change it at will. Second, because it can be open to challenge. And that's the other thing. It will give the individuals and charities and organizations representing individuals, if it were to be included in the UK, rights to appear before courts to protect. And another reason why, it's not just because of courts, it changes the tone of the debate. It helps educate people that actually people are entitled to adequate housing. So if one comes from a very orthodox Jewish family, for example, where the trend often is to have larger families, then social housing needs to take account of that factor, as indeed would a benefit policy, which is capped at 2 children. So we report every 5 years on that. And then there are other treaties, actually, also United Nations treaty. There's a treaty on the rights of children, which protects children's socioeconomic everyday rights. There's a women's treaty as well, specifically focused on women's everyday rights, and a disability treaty. And the disability treaty, in contrast to the other 3 that I've mentioned, do allow those with disabilities directly to petition a UN Committee on Disability Rights. And so that's another way of approaching this. So the principle in international law is you have to use all your national remedies first, but very often, because we don't protect these rights, there isn't a national remedy. So those working and campaigning on rights of those with disabilities, the Disability Convention, people would find of particular interest. The European Convention on Human Rights is a bit like our Human Rights Act, so it doesn't protect those rights, but we do have something called a European Social Charter, nothing to do with the European Union. This is the Council of Europe, the Human Rights Organization of Europe, but we've only partied to part of it. So it's very much as if these everyday rights are second tier in the United Kingdom, even though there's a fundamental principle of international human rights law that all rights are equal and indivisible. Now, there is I think it was Margaret who very helpfully posted the link for the consultation on the Equality Act. And when I was a commissioner on the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the Commission had proposed a socio-economic duty that is actually in the Act but has never been brought into force. And what that would do is it would mean that every local authority, every public body, when it's considering policies, it would have to think about everyday rights, the sort of the poorest, the most vulnerable in our community. Now, it's a good first step, but it's not as good as incorporating socioeconomic rights, everyday rights, into our British law. So it's worth supporting, but there is a great need, particularly with this huge income and wealth gap that is increasing in the United Kingdom, and which many have said contributes to a lack of trust and a lack of belief in democratic, a lack of belief in democracy, that it would be very helpful actually to try and narrow the gap. And one way is to bring in everyday rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geraldine. I have to share a very, very short story involving Rabbi Gluck and Geraldine, which I think symbolizes what this forum is all about. So 8 years ago, we hosted a roundtable on socioeconomic rights, and Geraldine was our guest speaker. And this was an exclusive roundtable. We had experts in the industry. And Geraldine, you elaborated more than you did now on the legal aspects, and Carter, the forest staff, and you used very human rights language. And at some point, Rabbi Gluck, you stood up and said, well, of course, in the Talmud, we call it X, Y, and Z. And for me, that was what this roundtable and this forum was all about, is how we have the same ideas and the same concepts of what socioeconomic and cultural rights and values mean, regardless of whether we're coming from it from a Jewish text or values perspective or a legal human rights perspective. So I just wanted to share that because it's still in my mind how the Jewish and the human rights come together, certainly on socioeconomic rights. But thank you, Geraldine, for that presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Geraldine, so much. I hope you'll be around at the end to answer questions when we do Q&A. That's
I was asked to speak to just 5 minutes, so it was a very condensed.
I know that's good. If you need to hop off, that's fine. But yeah, if
No, it's
you're
fine.
able
I can
to.
stay.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so I'll move on to our plans for the rest of the year. So sorry. So yeah, so I guess this is this is our first meeting. We just had or are having our first meeting. We're hoping to use the next month to get feedback from you and the other forum members who aren't present on this call on what issues you think we can work on as a group and what issues are affecting your organisations and what you see in the Jewish community. And then hopefully have a meeting in June just to consolidate these and potentially plan for some objectives. So we after that we will be having a meeting every 6 months, but this is more of an anomaly. But as I said before, we can do ad hoc meetings when forum members feel the need to. And then, yeah, newsletters. So these are more bulletins, and yeah, I mentioned these before. Every 3 months, and in which there'll be the main way that we communicate about policy developments. And we can share information that different charities want to put out, which are relevant to the aims of the forum. And the first one of these will be in July, probably before. We've not set a date for the meeting in July yet, but it'll probably be before that. And then, yeah, the landscape, political landscape, I guess. So as you can see, we've jotted down a few national policy developments which are relevant to some of the organisations here at least, and will affect access to everyday rights. Some of them in a positive way, some in a more negative way. But we want to work on these, not necessarily these specific policies, but these are just an example of things that we might be working on. But we want to work on them from a human rights perspective in areas in which they overlap with your work. And we want to be able to inform you about how these things may impact the rights of people you work with. And so that informing will largely be done through the quarterly bulletins we want to put out. But also, Rachel, Mia, and I, we are all very easy to contact by email. So if you ever want to just have a conversation with us about any of these, we're very happy to chat. So yeah, and also the other thing I want to say is, and I mentioned it before, we're also able to put you in touch with relevant organisations working on these issues, even in the case where we're not, because through the everyday, the ESCR network, which I mentioned before, we have contact to charities all across the UK in all 4 nations who work on all sorts of aspects of everyday rights, disability rights, food rights, rights for specific minority groups in healthcare, all of those sorts of things. So yeah, great. I guess that's it, and see if there are any questions or any feedback. Okay. Yeah, Margaret, you've raised your hand.
Hi, thanks. I can hear you, but I've got a strange sort of slight echo, so hopefully I can, we're clear enough and you can hear me all right. So there's a couple of things I was thinking about. First of all, obviously we've got that call that I put in the chat, but the other thing is come June, then we're going to have the review coming through, the government spending review. And by all accounts, it's going to be pretty devastating. I mean, we know that defence is ring-fenced. We know NHS is ring-fenced, but it sounds like there's going to be massive cuts in many other ways. So I'm just hoping or wondering if we want to try and prepare to an extent, even have some sort of a bit of a boilerplate of some things that we think might be in it that we want to respond to as a group, or will it be too soon? Because that's the 11th of June, I believe the spending review will be sort of discussed.
So, sorry, is the call for evidence? Sorry, just
there's 2 things.
So it finishes the 30th.
One's a call for evidence on a socioeconomic duty, but the other thing is actually about the government spending review, which is going to have a massive impact nationally. So I'm just wondering if there's something we want to think about trying in some way to think about being prepared. I mean, obviously there's the issue around 2-child benefit cap, which we think might be going to be rolled back, hopefully so, but there's going to be a lot of other things. And all the word that I'm hearing, I mean, although I no longer work directly in policy, I still know people who do, so I keep getting little whispers from people that I've worked with in the past, and everyone's saying, and it's in the press, it's going to be absolutely devastating. As far as we know, it's only really health and defence that's likely to be ring fenced. So I'm just wondering if there's something we want to prepare so that we can try and be off the blocks when the spending review comes and actually sort of comment about working with other agencies.
Yeah, so we've not prepared anything on that yet, and I mean, I guess in the initial steps, and this is what the next month is for, is that we'll be sort of looking into it and thinking about what areas we can work on. So it's nothing that we've actually already done planning on, the spending review specifically. It's not completely been on our radar. So if there's anything in the next few weeks, it probably is a bit too soon to really put something together. And full disclosure for me, I am on annual leave for the next 2 weeks. So I can't work on that in that time.
But I think there's also the wider issue in that René is really good in coordinating and facilitating, but we are far from being experts on these issues. But what we do, just positioning ourselves as part of the sector, and certainly in the Socioeconomic Rights Steering Committee, is we get the sense of where the sector, so the human rights sector working on these issues, is in terms of its priorities. And then with this forum, it will be about communicating those priorities, because we rely on their expertise. We do the bookending of the wider human rights story and what's Jewish about it, but also bringing the Jewish cases. But we're not necessarily both in terms of capacity and skill, to provide that almost legal expertise and analysis. From the recent meetings we've had, which actually was last week, this wasn't necessarily something that was on the top priority list of the Socioeconomic Rights Human Rights Forum of organizations. So we very much take our lead from them. But certainly the other bills that Jonathan highlighted, both as a coalition, but also on a bilateral level, there will be room to do more of that, specific submission or coordinated response.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
I did just want to add that there's a charity called Equally Ours, and they convene a group on specifically policy on equality, equality, policy, which we're not part of that group, but I have seen what they're working on, and I'm pretty sure that this was on there. So I am in touch with the person who convenes that, so I can put you in touch if you want.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to thank you all for speaking, and Geraldine and everyone from René Cassin. I need to run off, unfortunately, but I just wanted to thank you for bringing this important issue on my agenda, not something I thought or knew about before. And I think you're doing a great job in kind of putting it out there and making a case for it. And I wish you all the best with it, and I look forward to reading the updates from you and the bulletins and everything. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments, or even some reflections on how you see your organization both benefiting from, but also being what I would say an active participant in the forum? Because like Jonathan said, it's about the relationship goes both ways. We'll do the best we can to provide the updates and up-to-date developments, but we really depend on you as the frontline organizations to provide us with the Jewish community experience. maybe that will be something that we send after the meeting in a more detailed, as all good meetings are always followed up by evaluation forms. So we'll send that through. Yeah, Geraldine.
I just wonder what the potential is in terms of funding to get some expert papers on Jewish everyday rights. And I don't know whether you've thought about that, because that really would add quite a powerful dimension that you'd be able to use, you know, not just in the immediate future, but beyond.
To be honest, it isn't something that we thought of at all. And thank you for planting the seed of an idea. I think once we get feedback from members and we get a better sense of, we have our set of what we hope to achieve from this forum. Once we've aligned our objectives as partners, I think that will put us in a better position to then approach potential donors to whom both the Jewish and the wider human rights, socioeconomic rights aspect would be appealing. There's one other thing. We have, I think, 9 organizations that have signed up to the forum, and we'll share the list, but tell your friends. You are the frontline representatives in the Jewish community. If you have peers and colleagues from organizations that you think being part of this forum would benefit them and would contribute to what we want and hope to achieve from the forum, then please let them know, put them in touch with Jonathan and or Rachel, because if we want to be, we take the role of coordinating the Jewish voice very seriously, but it's only as good as the participants we have in the forum. So yeah, please, by all means, tell your friends.
Could I ask?
Okay, so we started, sorry, yeah?
I just ask, I mean, delighted to see Sharon here and also Rabbi Herschel. But I'm just wondering, what about the response of the other synagogues? Did you approach them to see if they wanted to join? I mean, you've now got this new liberal reform. I know they're sorting themselves out, but you still have the 2 strands. And specific synagogues have taken this up, as you well know, Mia, because you've invited speakers and spoken at them. So have you invited them to come along to this forum, and what has been the response?
So we've been focusing specifically on frontline organizations, and yourself, Geraldine, and Rabbi Gluck, is more because you have specific expertise and knowledge of things which can help the forum's objectives and help us communicate to policymakers about the Jewish experience, I guess, and also for you, Geraldine, specifically, be able to inform and advise us on everyday rights. So basically, in the first instance, we've only really been reaching out to frontline organizations, save a few exceptions. So we haven't been reaching out to shuls. I think I've not read, Margaret, your point in the chat. I'm going to read that. I have a feeling that's on the same topic.
But a number of synagogues operate like Sharon does, refugee drop-ins, food collections, so you've actually got a much wider frontline experience, and which would help you with your database and everything else.
And I think you're right, and I think that is when I said at the beginning, this forum is called the Jewish Everyday Rights Forum. It was really envisaged in a way that René Cassin focused some of its work to bring human rights to the Jewish community for the benefit of the Jewish community, but it's not exclusively for the Jewish community. And we take our role of standing alongside other marginalized groups like refugees or Roma seriously. And that's why, for example, Margaret is part of this group. And some of the conversations we're having now with drop-in centers is really to build the relationships. So at some point we can expand it and bring the lived experience of the asylum seekers and refugees, for example, that go to Jewish synagogue hosted drop-ins, and use those as case studies. So it's almost like a developmental process. At the moment, it's very much about enshrining the Jewish Everyday Rights Forum as, you know, as a concept within the Jewish community. And then we'll do what we do very well at Rene Gassan, is really extend that to include other marginalized groups as well.
No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's nothing else. Rachel, I wonder if you could just put the slide back up just so everyone can just see our emails. Just they need to jot it down. I'm sure you've been bombarded, but just thinking.
In the meantime, I'll just say that there were two important people involved in the process of drafting the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. One of them was Monsieur Cassin, who we take our name from, but the other person was Eleanor Roosevelt, who was really the driving force. And on the 10-year anniversary of the Declaration, 1958, she made a really important speech, and I'm going to paraphrase what she said. But basically, the speech was, at the end of the day, human rights don't mean anything unless they're enjoyed in our everyday life, in our home, in our community, in our workplace. And I think between the two of them, Monsieur Cassin envisaging the Article 25 or articulating Article 25, and Eleanor Roosevelt giving them meaning because they are, if we can't enjoy them in our everyday life, then it's not what significance do they have, but that is the majority of us. It is about accessing housing. It is about schools, you know, accessing education. It's about being treated fairly and equally as members of a society. So what do human rights, what significance do they have if they're not enjoyed by everyday people living ordinary lives in their everyday life? And this is what this forum is about, again, bringing those two ideas together.